that others might expect of us. So you might think about adult siblings. So you might have brothers and sisters who might have expectations of you during the holiday, or you might have expectations about time with them. And then adult children and their parents have expectations for one another. Holidays can sometimes amplify tensions in adult relationships. So like when we're trying to navigate what Christmas will look like and how time will be shared. And then also, even without children in foster care, in the home, parents can experience unmet expectations in their own home. So things like, I was hoping it would feel more special than it does. Or you might experience disappointment because you're experiencing more stress and pushback in what you're doing rather than joy or gratitude from others. And then, of course, there are also all the advertisements and commercials and social media where others' experiences are depicted in a particular light, and it creates perhaps unrealistic expectations and undue pressure on us as families. Then obviously, recent years have looked different for many of us. So you might be grieving changes. Some might be affected in their work or uncertain about their work. Some may be distant from their family. I know that I have a grandparent still in a assisted living facility, which I cannot visit at this time. Some have experienced losses of their own this year, like deaths. And things like that, I think, can often help us grow in our empathy for kids in care and the losses and uncertainty that they might be experiencing as well. I put some other ones on there as well. So things like financial stress, distant family. And then for children who are already in the home, so speaking for maybe biological children or children who have been adopted into the home, they might experience this Christmas differently with a change in the home. So for example, maybe a new child is placed in the home around the holidays. And the plans have changed. You might be accommodating different schedules due to visitations. Kids already in the home might be experiencing more stress as they notice a child in care having difficulty coping with all the changes and the stress. So because of those kids' previous experiences during the holidays, like during other years, they could be considering, I was expecting Christmas to be like this or like last year. Or for example, my parents seemed tired and frustrated this year. Or my new foster sister or foster brother takes up a lot of energy and a lot of attention. So the same could actually be felt by other children who've been in the home for a longer period of time too, during other previous holidays throughout the year. Maybe if there are other foster children who have been fostered and are currently in the home. I'm curious if any of that already resonates with anybody about expectations around the holidays and maybe even the unmet expectations that many adults have. Is that a particular feeling to others? I know that sometimes I have expectations around the holidays and they don't pan out the way that sometimes I wish they would in a particular year. So of course, then we have unmet expectations for the kids in foster care in the home. So I was hoping to be back with my family or with my mom or my dad for Christmas. I was hoping my grandmother would be approved already. I wanted a longer visit, or my mom didn't seem like herself when she did visit, and that made me sad or worried. So those are also unmet expectations around this time of year. And then actually some kids have very low expectations based on their previous experiences. I know that we've had here at the shelter younger and older kids over the years who have been afraid to ask for anything around the holidays because their experiences with holidays have left them feeling that they shouldn't expect very much, or maybe they've been moved around from home to home and you might have already lost other special things that you received. Some also need support and reassurance that they're worthy of receiving joyful feelings, great experiences, the gifts that they receive. In fact, some could be even guilty or overwhelmed for what they receive. I know that we had that situation whenever we had some kids who were previously homeless before coming into care a couple Christmases ago. So altogether, our own expectations for the holidays are most helpful when realistic. And many who serve kids in different capacities really want to make up for what children have perhaps never received during other holiday seasons by exposing them to lots of fun activities and impressive gifts. But then it's confusing and frustrating, and it hurts us when kids respond in turn with difficult behaviors or exaggerated moods instead of gratitude, maybe that sometimes some parents might expect in response. Amidst all those expectations and the likelihood for unmet expectations, I think a helpful approach would be similar to something in counseling that's called a bridge statement, where you return back to a neutral perspective. So I gave an example here. So say, for example, you have very low self-esteem. You're not going to jump from thinking of yourself as stupid to automatically having positive statements about yourself. That's very challenging to do. So in the middle, you would jump from I'm stupid to you begin to replace it with, no, I made a mistake when this happened. So you're not going to jump all the way to positive, but you're going to meet in the middle. And that's called a bridge statement. I made a mistake in this situation. I'm not stupid. But in our case here, when we relate it to a holiday, what I was thinking was, instead of expecting a kid to truly like an experience or be grateful for it, maybe accept your own effort, that you aim to make it pleasant for them and you want to connect with them and support them. And that's the bridge here in this example here. I think a final realistic expectation that I often share with our team here is, I think it's important to expect that for many kids in care, they may not be as excited as you are or I am for the experience that we provide them. For some, the differences and lifestyles between your family and theirs could actually be overwhelming at this time. So maybe perhaps expect that they may not be excited as you are. This next section, I want to focus on some mixed up emotions that are likely to happen around the holidays. Could I have a response from some others? What are some of the mixed up emotions that you think would be included around the holidays?
Maybe some confusion or guilt.
Okay, yeah. Guilt is one that's not often brought up, but definitely that is one that we're going to mention here in a moment. And I like that you said confusion, maybe an uncertainty about what to expect, especially if you're coming into a home for the first time. So with these mixed up emotions, every kid has a unique situation and can handle stressors and the holidays in different ways. But a common factor for all of the kids that will be in foster care in homes this Christmas are disconnections from their primary attachment relationships. Even when those relationships and the emotional support that they were provided was inadequate and the relationship was insecure. Even if a kid of any age can't articulate feeling a loss during this time, they certainly experienced that feeling of loss. and they're having to cope with not being with their own family. So some kids do feel safe in a new home, but remember that all the focus on family, like I was mentioning before, in advertisements and movies and books around this time of year, even in songs that you might listen to, there's a big focus on family. All those can serve as frequent reminders of that loss, that this isn't the way it's supposed to be. So my family was supposed to be together. Families in general are supposed to be together. I'm not around the people I'm supposed to be around. That might also include my biological siblings, if biological siblings are in a different placement, like maybe an older brother is in a residential setting, for example. So instead of sharing the whole holiday together also, so even on the slow days when you don't think much is happening, instead it's a brief scheduled opportunity that you spend the holiday together for families who have visitations. So the mixed up emotion here is obviously sadness. So that feeling could be intense sadness, but remember that it's also very common for other intense feelings to mask sadness. When sad looks mad is a very common phrase. So actually the source of outburst and throwing things and hitting walls, for example, could actually be profound sadness. And some kids internalize difficult emotions. So you might see that in anxiety or withdrawal, even things like thumb sucking, attempts to self-soothe. So those would be internalizing difficult emotions. And then some other kids externalize difficult emotions, hitting, biting, cursing, agitation. And then when difficult, or when describing it in words as difficult, those emotions, or if you feel like you wouldn't be understood if you did share what those emotions were, externalizing behaviors, the ones that I showed here, hitting, biting, cursing, agitation, other things that you obviously see, those are functional for showing that something hard is happening on the inside. So that feeling might look like anger or defiance on the outside, even though it's related to profound sadness on the inside. And then disappointment is also common during the holidays for kids in care. You might think of the overpromise and the under delivery of a biological parent or the child's family. Something was said, but it didn't really happen, or something was offered and it wasn't really received. Or they might go to a visitation and mom or dad acted different, and that was an under delivery. Or again, with the timelines and cases, I thought I would be home or with my grandmother by Christmas. So that's overpromise. Maybe, it could be by someone in the family who promised that, but then an under delivery. So that's related to disappointment. And then guilt was one that was mentioned. So another possibly unexpected feeling is guilt. A kid really enjoys the experiences of the holidays with your family, but it just doesn't feel right. Sometimes it might feel like betraying my own family. Or my sister is in a different placement and she didn't get to experience this. A related feeling to that would be worry. So looking at a table with lots of food and knowing that your mom or dad, I'm sorry. A related feeling would be worry. So looking at a table with lots of food and knowing that your mom or dad or cousins would be hungry. Or receiving gifts, wondering if Santa visits others that you care about, especially if you never had Santa living in your own home. It might not feel right, wondering if someone you care about was forgotten. And then another is excitement, because new experiences, new gifts, new opportunities. And then altogether, many of these confusing emotional reactions, and by emotional, I mean, it's also happening to the body. So the body's reacting to stress. So stress shows up in shutting down, excessive sleep. You could have mood instability, more crying, more outward anger, and then hyperarousal too, excitement, but also anxiety, difficulty sleeping, difficulty calming down after an exciting experience. Altogether, all of those are related to grief and loss, and those are a connected factor here in the holidays. Was there a question from someone that I missed? Okay, I'll keep listening. Remember that it's not just about loss of being away from family too, but loss of control. So feeling powerless about your circumstances, and then the loss of what's familiar to you. So loss of community connections. Maybe a child in your care went to a particular church. We've had quite a few kids come and stay with us that have gone to Marshallese churches, and then trying to reconnect them with that experience has been important for them. That could be particularly important during holiday seasons too. But also loss of what's familiar with traditions and foods at home. I remember over Thanksgiving a couple of years ago here, teenagers were describing the 3 or 4 different ways that their families made sweet potatoes. So it can be the small things that you experience a loss in from your home, not having that particular recipe that you were wanting from your mom or from your grandmother. Then with difficult emotions, some kids might be more verbal about how they're affected, but most are likely going to avoid the topic or don't have the skills and language to express what's happening. They might even communicate that everything is all right, but their body communicates the opposite. Sometimes counselors call that decoding. You have to do some decoding whenever their experience and their body language and their expression doesn't match what they're saying with their voice about what's really happening. And then also, different age kids show grief in different ways. Developmental ages are more important here than chronological ages, but grief might look like tuning out or isolation. It might look like a disintegration of behavior. It might look like a disintegration of the progress that you've seen so far. So meaning they might revert back to previous behavioral difficulties during a very stressful time, like during the holidays, even for older kids. And that could be temporary during this time of stress. But when you experience a lot of stress, like all the emotions during the holidays, progress, given the amount of change that's happening for kids, can be very challenging. So I think one of the expectations is to be able to try to just maintain. So to be able to maintain for some kids is actually quite a huge feat. And I'll mention some things at the end about what can help kids maintain throughout the season that's coming up. I did want to pass along some information on a couple of the different stages and what grief would look like in each. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. I have done a previous training before on grief and loss, and we went into more detail, but this one's going to move a little bit quicker. For infant to 2, obviously, whenever a sense of security is going to be challenged, there's going to be more crying. For some of the older kids in this stage, infant to 2, you might have more clingy behaviors, cranky, more sleep disturbances, rocking as an attempt to self-soothe, even biting. And then 2 to 4, and what I'm doing here, I'm approximating ages. Again, it's more about the developmental stage than it is the chronological age for the child. But 2 to 4, they might also be more clingy, more anxious, stubborn, with temper tantrums and bad dreams are often reported. They could also, again, regress with behaviors like talking or regression with toileting whenever they're stressed. And then the next one, 4 to 7. I think 4 to 7 is interesting because they might begin to assume that the situation is a result of something negative about themselves. They're having a little bit more awareness around their relationships and the absence of a parent. So it might be related in their perspective of something that they've done or something that they've done wrong, especially at these earlier ages. They also typically have repeated questions. That's often a need for reiteration in order to understand. So if you have a lot of questions, that's actually very helpful because it's helping the child understand what's happening. It can be frustrating for us though. That's why helping them hear their story over and over is so important. And particularly using concrete ways of showing them what's happening. You might even use family drawings. So draw your family with that child in a particular home and then draw the location of their parent, or if their sibling lives in a different placement, draw who would be in that home. It's a very concrete way of showing what is being experienced when they have all those questions. They're also typically somatic symptoms, so related to the body. So headaches, stomach aches, body aches, overreactions to minor, emotional concerns. So that they're hurting or they have a cut and it's a dramatic deal. The overreaction is intense in that situation when there could be grief involved. And then also attempts to gain more control at this stage, because that feels secure to have control. And then at age 8 to 11, just an approximation again, at these ages, kids are having a better understanding of their biological relationships, so they can more fully understand what's happening with their own family. And biologically, what's happening is kids are beginning to have logical thought. But sometimes that logical sequence goes even farther during important milestones, so Christmases, birthdays, by what's being affected. So the absence of that person during that milestone. So what it sometimes can look like is they might go from believing or understanding that my mom can't parent me right now because I'm in foster care. So my mom can't parent me right now, to a logical jump would be, my mom doesn't want to parent me right now. If she did want to, she'd be doing all that she needs to be doing so that we're together, especially here during the holidays. So sometimes that's a difficulty for beginning in this age range. And then at these later ages, the pain is generally more interpersonal than it is about disappointment from things that they're missing out on. In adolescence, so for teenagers, their situation is complicated as they start to make sense of themselves in more than one family. So obviously identity is the task of teenagers. Grieving looks like confusion, complaints, difficult or exaggerated emotions. Basically, they're trying to process their different surroundings and life in multiple families. There might also, and remember that your identity comes at first from your own family and from your own community too. So they might also be targeting others or targeting towards others when they're frustrated or angry due to stress. So in that case, it's important that we be aware that if a kid says something to me and it's very hurtful to me, it might lead me to grieve what expectations I had for this season with them, or it might lead me to grieve, I thought our relationship was farther along than it is now, and now I feel like I'm the target of their frustration and anger. I think a really important tool here is something like a Q-tip little strategy, which just means quit taking it personally. Another one that I stress with our employees here is the difference between, is it happening to me or is it happening in front of me? If I believe that these behaviors are happening to me, then I'm going to probably react personally out of an offense towards me or some violation towards me. If I realize that it's happening in front of me, and these behaviors due to their stress would be happening with most any other person in this situation, then I can step back and I can help reassess the situation and consider all that's happening around them. Now, obviously, grief can also look like withdrawal and mood swings towards depression too, for adolescents and for teenagers. Was there another question? Okay, along with these developmental stages, remember that it's that grief is fluid. So it seems to subside at times. So sometimes it goes away and sometimes it reappears at other times. So even an unexpected difficulty at the end of a great day or a great week could be related to difficulty coping with grief in general during this season. So you might have 4 or 5 great days in a row, and then the week ends on an awful note, or you might have a great day and you tried a couple new activities, or you went some new places that they were able to experience and it was great, and then at the end of the day it's really hard. That can be related to difficulty coping with grief during this time. I do have another question here. How do you think grief relates to specific dates or to events around the year? So how do you think grief relates to the holidays, to specific dates? Any ideas?
There are a lot of traditions associated with holidays and specific dates. And so when we miss out on those traditions, we feel the grief crops up on us in those moments.
Yeah, that's great input. Yeah, that's true about the traditions that they're missing out on and the reminders of what we don't have available to us. One of the strategies that I have at the end is incorporating something perhaps from their biological family and their experience in your home now. So maybe it's a recipe that they really enjoyed, or maybe some decoration that was important to them. Find a way to include something like that. The reason I added grief in here is because developmental grieving typically happens around milestone events. So when I say milestone events, I think things like birthdays, holidays, special celebrations. So here's an example of maybe winning an award for a team sport and your parent wasn't able to be there. So developmental grieving around these situations. There's another one about growth and progress, and you've learned a new task, but it wasn't with your parent. It might have been with your foster parent or someone else that they know well. And then things like the driving for teenagers. That's an important milestone for them. And the first days of school. So what happens is that those joyful reminders to most of us of growth and change and successes and celebrations for birthdays and holidays and things like that, those joyful reminders to most of us are instead a reminder, again, that things aren't the way they should be. I also added on there, or I wanted to add on there, that some foster families are going to grieve a child not being here this Christmas whenever they had a strong connection with them last year, or maybe some other children in the home, a biological child or another foster sibling grieves that this child just left and they're not going to be here for Thanksgiving or for Christmas. So I include all that as a reminder that when things are falling apart for a kid during this season, or you're seeing challenging behaviors come up, again, that he or she is reverting back to things like the toileting, for example. That it's not just a kid behaving badly, it's a kid with experiences of trauma whose behaviors are communicating to us. And again, all behavior is communication. So if I see a difference from last week or a new difficulty is perplexing to me, something's come up and this is harder than this task was last month, it's a clue that he or she is having a hard time coping. Remember too, that grief is more than hard work emotionally, it's also physically demanding. So if what I'm needing for him to do is no longer happening, then I need to remember that changes in mood and activity and motivation are also clues that they're having a hard time coping. So if they're checking out, if they're sleeping more than usual, and it might be related to having a hard time coping. This next section here is related to responding to difficult emotions. I think one of the most promising ways to respond when you see confusing behaviors and reactions is not to ask questions like, why did you do this? Or why are you blank? Because those can carry a weight of blame and shame when we're trying to figure out what's happening. What happens is that most of the time these kids don't know why they're experiencing what's coming up, or they might not be able to put it in enough words to describe. So when a kid has difficulty expressing verbally what's happening, or avoids or internalizes all those hard feelings, a helpful approach, I think, is often to notice with empathy. So here on the bottom, it says notice with empathy and reflect your best guess of what might be happening, actually helping give some words to them. And what happens when you give your best guess is often kids will respond, no, it's actually this, or they might give you a no, and then they might come back at a different time because you're reflecting on their emotion. They might begin to tell more about what's happening. I did want to share a couple of evidence-based models. So these are things that have been proving to work in different settings, and in foster homes, in residential settings, in schools, in play therapy. So all these different settings find that these skills work to help kids understand what's challenging them emotionally. So the first one here, it's pretty simple. It's called collaborative problem solving. Basically, you start with, I noticed. So I noticed that your mood is different today than last week. It can be simple that you notice. I noticed that you haven't been following through with the chores that you typically do. It could be, I noticed that you didn't want to call your mom tonight. So simply, I noticed that, and then the change for them. And then you ask, what's up? So in collaborative problem solving, that's called the empathy step. Basically, it involves reflective listening and clarifying questions. So before you're asking more from them, so adding on more expectations for them, you're trying to understand from their perspective. And because you're the one who notices it and wants to clarify what it's about, then it's also showing empathy, that you care to ask. So before you ask more from them, you understand from their perspective. Then you can invite them to offer what could help. So maybe it's related to the phone call that they don't want to make to their parent that they typically do. You could invite them to offer what could help if they were feeling, sad about their mom not picking up the phone for a couple of days or something like that. You could invite them to offer a suggestion. I wonder if there's a way to contact her in a different way. Or I wonder if there's a way that we could try to send something to her, pass something along to her. So inviting them to offer a solution, that's why it's called collaborative problem solving. So the kids are helping out with finding a solution to what's challenging to them. The other example I put on here was from conscious discipline. So conscious discipline is particularly effective with younger kids, but this skill is going to be effective with some older kids too. So it's called the DNA process. So I put the acronym on the left side there. So it's describe, name, and acknowledge. So particularly for younger kids, you might even model what it looks like. So you notice them upset and you say, your arms are going like this and your face is going like this. And when you model it for them, when you show them what's happening to their own body, it also offers a pause, and sometimes they share eye contact and look to you to see what's happening. So they're looking in your direction. So that's the describe. I see your body doing this. Your arms are going like this. Your face is going like this. And then you name. So you name an emotion that you think is at play here. You think applies to this situation. So you seem worried, or you seem angry. And then you acknowledge what it could be. So you seem angry. You really wanted to talk to your mom on the phone tonight. You were hoping to talk to her about the gifts that you received today. And you don't have to do all of them together. You could just do, describe their body. You seem worried. You were hoping to spend time with your brother today. You seem angry. You were wanting that snack instead of this snack. So those are the basics of the DNA process in conscious discipline. And then the last one that I put on here is from child-centered play therapy. So if any of your kids are participating in play therapy, this is very likely the type of play therapy that they're doing. So what it includes is reflective responding in a way where the adult is following and not leading. So it gives a kid a chance to express to us what's happening. And it may be in their change of behaviors, but the goal is to help the parent understand the child and the child to feel understood. So in play therapy, but if you were just having this type of reflective responding and noticing changes in a kid, what this accomplishes is I'm here, I hear you, I see you, I understand, I care. So those are, for any play therapist, those are called the be with attitudes. That's the goal that you're trying to accomplish with a kid who you're working with. So I'm here, I hear you, I understand, I care. I also put on there what it does not mean. So even if I'm with a kid and trying to help listen to what their concern is, it doesn't mean I can solve your problem. It doesn't mean I always agree. It doesn't mean I must make you happy. What it does mean is I know this is hard and it's okay to not be okay. So that's called reflective responding. So being okay with a kid being sad about a situation, because that sadness to them is important. It means something about their relationship is different now. Are there any questions about this section?
Are the different strategies that you suggested, do some of them work best for different ages? Or would you say it's like, let's try them and see what happens regardless of age?
I would try these with any kid of any age. On the conscious discipline, I'm probably not going to, well, in some situations, I might show a teenager maybe how their voice is responding. I hear your voice like this, and then you seem angry right now. Sometimes for an older kid, it might feel patronizing if you say you seem angry and they're obviously angry. So conscious discipline was designed for younger age kids and education settings. But on collaborative problem solving, I use this one all the time. I noticed even things that are positive changes. So maybe I noticed that you chose to do your math work or your math homework this afternoon instead of your reading homework first. What's up? They might say, I don't know, I didn't have much reading homework to do, so I decided to get most of it done first. So maybe something like that with an older kid. But I use I noticed a lot. It's a really approachable way to show that you're seeing changes in a kid, and particularly changes whenever they might look upset or be withdrawn or sitting alone, things like that. And then for play therapy, I mean, teenagers participate in play therapy also. And this is the goal of any parent too, or anyone caring for a kid, is that we understand them and to help them feel understood. And teenagers want to feel understood. They want to know that we are here for them and that we hear them and understand them and care. For a teenager, obviously the here with them might look like a different proximity. So we might not be together all the time or as physically close throughout the day, but that we are available to them. So that's still a be with attitude for an older kid. And then again, I know this is hard. It's okay to not be okay. I think that would be well received by an older kid. I did want to point out that even sharing a similar situation can also help with empathy and connection. So maybe you are the one that responds to them. I'm feeling pretty uncertain right now, kind of makes me grumpy. I wonder if it's the same for you. So kind of laying out what, changes are looking like and how they're affecting you. And then you give an emotion, kind of makes me grumpy, having to do all these other things on our schedule that, I really didn't have time for. I wonder if that's the same for you. And it kind of puts words to the situation so a kid can maybe even mirror some of the words that you're using. Or maybe even like, wow, you've had a lot of big changes. I bet it's hard to trust us right now to take good care of you since you've been in, 3 or 4 or 5 different places. Even if they don't respond, the understood or the understanding is still shared with them. The reason I add some strategies like that is personally, I think the hard moments when there are difficult emotions, although they're challenging, those can be wonderful opportunities to connect. So reflecting and acknowledging that this is hard, it does the same. So I'm with you when things are going well. I think I put that on here. Yep. I'm with you when things are going well. I'm with you when things are not. It's not verbalized as a statement like that, but that's the sentiment. Hey, it's going to be a tough time here. I know that, this holiday is not what you expected. You thought you'd be back with your family. Things aren't going well for you, but I'm here and I'm with you when it's not going well. I'll be with you when, it says I'm with you when things are going well, and I'm with you when things are not going well. And right now it's not going well. And like with a teenager, I might give more space, but I'm still available. The next section here, I put about anticipating needs. So I just was speaking about availability. So the availability that I speak of there also relates to regulating your own emotions and your own behaviors. So that would be called self-regulation. These 3 areas, or these 3 areas of focus at the top, are the essentials of any type of trauma-informed care, whether it's trust-based relational intervention or some other practice or strategy. Even conscious discipline would say that connection and having a kid feel safe, not only that they know that they're safe, that you are a safe person, but they feel safe with predictability in the environment, and that those are important, but also self-regulation, be able to calm yourself, being able to recognize your own emotions, how they're impacting you. Those are super important. But what's really important for us adults to know is that the capacity for a kid to regulate their own emotions and own behaviors, especially during a lot of stress, is not something that most kids in foster care will show up with. It's so impacted for kids who have experienced trauma because that task of self-regulation relies on your earliest caregivers. So it relied on your caregiver being able to meet your physical needs and meet your emotional needs. And then based on what they did for you, you learn to manage your own emotions and manage how to help your own body, for example, whenever you need a change. So because there's been so much inconsistency for younger kids, what happens, because we learn from our caregivers how to regulate our own body and emotions, what happens in the absence of that early caregiving, specifically caregiving that has been predictable and consistent and nurturing and empathic. So in the absence of that, most foster and adoptive parents must act as external regulators at the start. So that means our job will be recognizing needs for the kids and responding to potential needs, but also it means being proactive to set them up for success. So thinking ahead, maybe in planning the day, or will this activity that we're doing not be a good one? Maybe it doesn't fit with what's going to happen after, because it's going to be hard for them to calm down. Those types of thinking that's more proactive about anticipating their needs. And just the picture that I put down here on the bottom, what it's showing is that self-regulation on the far right only happens with a foundation of external regulation in the early years of life, and then you begin to do it with your caregiver. So kids in co-regulation start to use words to get their needs met. But a lot of what we're doing during really stressful times with kids is external regulation, trying to recognize and anticipate their needs and then be proactive to set them up for success. And then I added some more information from trust-based relational intervention here. Particularly, they're called the empowering principles. So over the holidays, these are super important. It means meeting the needs of the body and making the environment safe and predictable. So obviously your home would be safe, but that doesn't mean that a kid feels safe with uncertain changes or not knowing what to expect next. So predictability is very important. I also added some things that are important on here. So active play that meets sensory needs, that is beneficial to the body. The recommendation is every 2 hours, but what I was suggesting here is that maybe if you have activities that you do during the holiday season that require a lot of focus, that you include active play as an activity before that. So maybe if you have to go to some sort of recital or performance for another sibling before that activity that requires a lot of focus, you would have opportunity at least 2 hours in advance to have some sort of active play, because that's more regulating to the body. Also including activities that are calming to the body. Things that use the large muscles, things that require a lot of push and pressure, things like pushing off bike pedals. Riding a bike is calming to the body. Climbing activities, push-ups, pull-ups, but also all the other things that you do that incorporate pressure. So bear hugs at home, or more hugs, or cuddling on the couch, or tuck-ins at bedtimes with pressure and wrapping them up in a burrito, things like that. Those are meeting sensory needs of the body too, because it's calming. It's the same reason why you would swaddle an infant. So it's the reason why calming an infant works using swaddling, because it's providing proprioceptive pressure. It's pressure on the body to meet that need, that sensory need. But you can do that with an older kid who's being tucked into bed too. I mentioned a couple of things there as ways to connect with, pressure and hugs and tuck-ins and things like that. Other ones would be full body movement. So, and that would be organizing to the body. So things like swimming during the holidays would be a really good activity, because that can be, that can incorporate all of your sensory experiences. Another strategy on here is adequate hydration. So especially when a child is playing or they're stressed, it helps get ahead of challenges. Actually, research shows that dehydration leads to aggressive behaviors. So adequate hydration is important. Also, nutritional snacks and food. TBRI recommends every 2 hours if possible. The goal there is to stabilize the blood sugar in the body because the brain uses the most blood glucose in your body, your blood sugar, because the brain uses the most, it's the most impacted whenever you have significant drops in your blood sugar based on not eating for a long time. So that's why they have snacks more frequently than most people would consider, especially things that are protein snacks, cheeses, peanut butters, nuts, that are kind of longer lasting carbohydrates. Snacks also help with food security issues too during the holidays. Also adequate rest because exhaustion causes dysregulation. Also, maybe creating safe spaces or a quiet space in the home to retreat to from being overloaded. And then providing choices. Why do you think choices are super important during the holidays, particularly?
Gives the kid control.
Yes, it does give the kid control. What happens around holidays about adults and different events? I'll give you a teaser. Holidays are times when adults often exert more control based on expectations. So you go to an event or pictures with the family or some family gathering. So adults have more control based on expectations for what kids wear, when things happen, who they'll be with. And then kids of all ages often hear more correction during the holidays. Why do you think they hear more correction during the holidays?
Because as a parent, we want everything to be done right. So any little mishap or you're messing up this and you're messing up that.
Yeah,
So,
that's true. I told you to wear the blue shirt, not the gray shirt. But also the reason that kids of all ages often hear more correction during the holidays is because they're around their parents more during the holidays. So there's more time to be upset. There's more time to be overwhelmed with the kids in the house. So you're together more, so it's more likely that kids will hear more correction. So it's super important to add in more choice and voice as well during that time. So providing reasonable choices helps for kids who crave control. I also put on here a couple other things that could help fit in an increase in connection. So if you're going to an activity where you might not be able to stay attentive to them, maybe you're listening to another kid in a performance or stuff like that, a quick face-to-face game with that other child who will now have to participate by sitting and watching. So a quick face-to-face game with them, maybe using your hands or playing a game back and forth with each other could be helpful before leaving for an event, particularly with touch and eye contact, which are calming for kids. I mentioned extra hugs throughout the day and throughout the holidays. Prioritizing bedtime routines and attachment rituals, especially if that's not possible at other times of the year, whenever you're really around home and can incorporate more nurturing in those routines of the day, attachment routines, those are super important. Then more playful interaction, if you have possibility to do that. Tag, making something with older kids that feels like it's for younger kids, so recipes or crafts that you do. Coming up here in October is going to be like jack-o'-lanterns or pumpkins, things like that. And then the next section that I put in here is about transitions. So this one is super important. One of the most important needs that I didn't include in all of that before was adequate preparation in advance of transitions. So I know that you know that routines are important to help kids feel safe, but they also provide clearer boundaries. And because there are fewer variables, kids can relax in knowing what to expect. So having predictability and letting them know in advance what's going to happen. So providing notice. And it could be, you know, we're doing this this evening. A lot of times what would be most helpful is to do it in a shorter time frame before. So maybe you tell them what's happening in the evening, and then an hour before you leave, you tell what's happening in an hour, and then 15 minutes before they need to get ready or you know, jump in the car, remind them again, hey, we're getting ready to go to this spot. So those transitions, those routines also help with the development of good habits. So good habits like around meal times and sleep times, which can be disrupted during the holidays whenever they're out of school. But the challenge is that during holidays, the activities and expectations you have are likely new for a kid who did not live in your home last year. So their family looked one way and had particular routines, maybe very little structured routines is probably more the case. So incorporating that and helping kids know what to expect is super important. The challenge is that during the holidays, I think I may have just said this, the activities and expectations you have are new. Yeah. Some other things about transitions are that being asked to stop one thing and to start another is a very common trigger for challenging behavior, especially for kids who have emotional or developmental challenges. So given that the big changes for most kids have been abrupt or traumatic, like being removed from your home or during an arrest being taken from your parent. So given that the big changes for most have happened around abrupt or traumatic events, kids in care are particularly sensitive to unexpected changes. So they often have a hard time making other daily transitions. So between activities and tasks, between places, between objects of attention. So transitioning from a preferred activity, something they like doing, to something that they won't necessarily want to do. That's going to be very hard. So giving a notice in advance or several notices in advance is super important. And then when there's resistance or avoidance or distractions and meltdowns, those are often the result of kids being overwhelmed by their emotions regarding that change, especially when it's something that they didn't expect to happen. I did add one section on here about some different diagnoses for kids and how transitions would affect them. So for kids with ADHD, anxiety, autism, and sensory processing issues, they particularly find transitions very difficult. For ADHD, it relates to what they perceive as rewarding. You might already know that ADHD, the letters stand for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So attention deficit is very commonly known, but it's sometimes helpful to think about the attention problem as being a difficulty regulating attention. Not that they just don't have it, but a difficulty regulating attention, which means turning to something you were expected to do instead of something that you find rewarding to do. So that's when the ADHD really shows. And then for autism, sameness and predictability is very practical. Otherwise, the world feels confusing and overwhelming when activities are changed. So a lot of notice is required for a child with autism. And then whenever there are sensory difficulties, the world that they're surrounded by when they're overstimulated feels confusing and may seem to move too fast, too loud, too many people. So if you go to another home and there's, you know, a large gathering of people and they're combined in one space together, that could be very overwhelming for some kids. Or if you go to some play or performance and it might be the noise itself that is intolerable to them. Then again, having order helps you feel helps you feel in control and calm, but changing things up too quickly can result in resistance and emotional meltdowns. And then for kids with anxiety, trouble with transitions often comes from a place of fear. So fear of the unknown, fear of what's going to happen, fear when they're put into a situation that's new to them, fear of messing up, particularly with social anxiety. And some stimuli is also usually involved too. So if you had an upsetting experience with a particular setting, a transition to that new setting can trigger anxiety. So for younger kids, it might be transition to the car seat and your anxiety is related to the car seat. Maybe a kid of any age, it might be related to visitation. So the last couple visitations were upsetting. So you have anxiety about the visitation and that transition to that, or maybe even away from the visitation. Also other places that you might be around at home or in the community. So if they were hurt while they were eating at the dining room table, or if they were hurt in a bathroom, then anxiety around those types of situations can affect transitions. Okay, I'm gonna move on to, it looks like the last section here, and I wanted to check in and see if there's any questions before I go. Okay, we'll have time at the end too.
Hey, Adam,
Yes.
I've got a, so with like holidays, like, so when you've got food insecurities and then you've got Halloween, right? Like that becomes, there's just an excess of stuff all the time. And I feel like we work so hard, you know, all year long in therapy for insecurities and recognizing that just because someone else is eating something, you know, we have food for you. You will always be fed, but seeing some, you know, like we see like a process, but then we have like this week long just food extravaganza.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you have any insight. I mean, just being aware of it, I think is a lot of it, because the meltdown, Halloween meltdown is real for all kids. Like,
if you were just doing it
crazy,
with neighbors, like if you had, you know,
right,
neighbors in the street and you organized with them in advance that maybe whenever your family comes or your kids come to the house, that maybe there's something else provided instead of a food related Halloween item. So maybe a trinket, or, you know, sometimes there's little stuff that, you know, come from the dollar store or whatever.
Okay.
But if your child particularly has a lot of difficulty with food, obviously letting them know in advance what that experience would look like.
I mean,
and then
is
setting
it like
up
hurtful
in a way
to
that
just like them seeing every kid doing free for all to just be like, yeah, this is Halloween and we're just gonna free from let everybody just eat until they're sick? I think that I don't know. That one, I just noticed that Halloween sometimes can be a thing. And if we see everybody else doing something, like putting the limitation on them and saying, no, like you're done. This had, like, you've got to be done. But like that feeling of, like, what's the word? Feels like withholding, right, to them, because it's like they see other people still. So I don't know. I just wonder if you had some insight. You can think about it, but I'd love some.
Yeah, the strategies that they would
there.
share from trust-based relational intervention that Dr. Purvis used to always share is that, you know, carrying an item with you, and if it were a particular snack that they were looking forward to, and they were able to carry that along And if they got hungry along the way, then that's the one that they choose from their pocket. And then knowing that the other items would be reserved for them, portioned out over time. So that's the one thing that, I've heard communicated before with situations like that.
Like one success we had was like saying, okay, we are going to have treat. We're going to eat tonight, today. We are going to eat the treats from 3 houses or something like ahead of time, so that when they still see people else eating, but after, well, we've had our 3. Remember, this is number 1, number 2. But I don't know. I just wondered if there was any other. Yeah, jump in.
I almost wonder if you take going back to giving choices that TBRI talks about, right? Like giving him the choice, right? Whether it's like, okay, do you want 3 or 5 pieces tonight, right? Still within reason that you want to provide, but then that gives your kid control, and they, compromising is also part of TBRI as well. So you might try that and see if that helps too.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's a very challenging one, and not just for kids in care. But let's see here. Our last section. Oh yeah, I forgot I added that in there. So it's related to being overstimulated in an environment, especially here at holiday time. But some strategies to think about. So obviously taking time to let them know what's going to happen and why. Uncertainty invites resistance, anxiety, meltdowns. Some families on holidays expect kids to go along and meet expectations without much explanation, but it's really helpful for them to know what to expect. So instead of expecting kids to step up and be more regulated in stressful or overstimulated or chaotic environments, I think another aspect is being more flexible, because we have more capacity for accommodation, just like you were mentioning with some of the suggestions there. So doing something flexible maybe this year compared to what you might do different years based on a particular child that's with you, because we're the ones that really have the most capacity for accommodation. And then role plays. So role playing what to expect in new situations before you encounter them. So maybe if you're going to a particular household, and maybe who to expect there and how many people to expect there. So role playing what to expect. You might even show in their place how to respond or what to do, or practice doing it, especially with younger kids. You could use toys or stuffed animals to practice too. Simplifying. So consider simplifying what the next couple of weeks and months look like, especially since the holidays tend to have a lot of sensory experiences between foods, music, screen time while out of school, hustles to other shopping and cooking and activities and things like that. For example, if you have a child who you already know is hypervigilant and has a hyperactive stress response, easily overwhelmed when they encounter new situations, then a wise move would be to consider in advance whether a particular planned activity may be unhelpful for them. Obviously, you want growth by participating in ways that other kids are participating, but also trying to just set it up in a way that would be successful for them. That doesn't mean giving up on everything you enjoy, but maybe it's just done in a different way. Doing too much could also steal from adequate time for rest and recalibration for yourself or others in the family too. I also put prioritizing on there. So prioritizing the things that matter most to your family. One way might be to ask, the 4 or 5 things that each person enjoys most about this holiday. What are you looking forward to as far as eating or doing or visiting during the holiday? If it's something that no one mentioned as important, then maybe evaluate whether it's needed this year, especially if you've recently had big changes like a new child come into the home. Doing something like this can also help with providing a voice and a sense of control to them. Helping include their priorities in your family's plan can help with resistance too, helps mitigate resistance. Also talk with kids in your care about what holidays are like with their biological family. So if they can remember and, incorporate some tradition or food or decoration that's possible for you to incorporate, that would go a long way in helping them feel seen and heard and a part of the family, promotes value and belonging. And another way of being proactive about common issues is to talk in advance about the possible big feelings that would show up, especially if you have, more visitations and during this time of year. So talk to them about things that we mentioned before, like sad can often look mad, or give permission to feel sadness or anger. Don't be afraid of feelings, but become a safe adult to be present with when they do experience those hard feelings. Also, talk to your biological children about how a new child might feel. So that would be really important to introduce in a way that is age and developmentally appropriate to help them grow their empathy for the new child in the home. That way, if your new child or your child in care is melting down or seemingly sabotaging an experience, you can take that moment to remind each other about what you had talked about before, about what they're experiencing. And that type of awareness as a whole family can lead to more unity and empathy to help understand each other at least. If a child in your care is not able to have contact with their family out of safety or for some other reason, you can still include opportunities to express how they feel, picking out an item for a biological parent or sibling living with another family, or writing letters, doing activities. Giving something tangible to do is a great way to help process hard feelings. So even if the project or present can't be provided directly to the family member, it's possible that it can be passed along, or it's also the process itself that can be therapeutic and support the grief for the child. And then helping serve others, I think that's another opportunity that sometimes is missed. So along with those activities to process feelings, helping kids find way to serve others. We know that when we're dealing with difficult emotions ourselves, doing something for someone else can sometimes really help us feel better. That's probably the same for a younger child too. Then this is our last part here. I just wrote heap out grace. So on the kids that are having a hard time during Christmas, that looks different than it did before. For other kids in the home that this Christmas might look different for, and then, provide grace to yourself for all that you're doing, because it is amazing work. But that is the wrap up of the content that I have, but can help out with any other questions as best as I can.
Does anyone have questions for Adam?
I don't have a question, but do you care if I share a strategy that I've used?
Sure, yeah.
I think you hinted on it a little bit. So I usually mostly take in teen girls, but what I've done in the past is depending on whose house I go to for the holidays, I always designate like a guest room as like their safe room. And, whether it's my mom's house, my sister's house, and they know, and I show the kid the room and they know at any point in time, no questions asked, they're allowed to go to that room for however long they need. And my family's aware of it. And they also know, right, not to stop them, not to ask why, so then it also gives them the control to unengage and re-engage whenever they want to. And so I know that's been
Yeah, that's an amazing suggestion. Thanks.
I'd like to ask about suggestions for helping others, for children, for suggestions, how I could get them involved with helping others.
I think a simple one at home would be helping, with a recipe. That could be connecting together, but also baking that, and then you could provide it to someone else. So that's a connecting experience and a serving experience. Any other suggestions?
Growing up, we used to do, they don't do it here in Farmington anymore, but we would take groceries and fruit to different people in the community. If you can find something like that, it was really good for kids to actually take the delivery, go see, especially some of the old folks in the assisted living homes. And that could be just a really good experience for them if you could find something like that.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Because I was definitely thinking outside the home.
Yeah, our kids, a couple, well, I think it was before COVID, obviously, but we did the snack pack program. So even our kids who had, malnutrition and, physical neglect at home, they enjoyed that experience of providing food to others. So I'm sure there are quite a few programs in our area about that or related to that.
My family likes to prepare a meal for Souls Harbor a few times a year together. And that's been a good one also, in years past, just helping, especially my biological children, to just kind of normalize that like addiction recovery is a real thing too. And that, they hear a lot of stories about what addiction looks like. And so just being able to see just another stage of transition and people who are working really hard, and it's a good experience. And Souls Harbor is really great too, because the whole family can participate in preparing. You can cook there, or you can cook at home. You can use their ingredients, you can use your own, you can order pizzas and have them delivered. I mean, there's like any level for whatever works for your family and your style, but all services welcome, and they're just really grateful. And it's a really good, it's been a positive way for my family to serve.
Also, there's a foster parent that I've seen on Facebook that's working to get either some meals made or some baskets put together for some bio families for Thanksgiving. So if anyone's interested in doing something like that, just contact me. I'll put my information in the chat and I can put you in contact with her. It's Kara Goldridge, if any of you guys know her. Anybody else have anything?
Back to the serving, our family likes to do random acts of kindness sometimes, and like paying for someone's thing going through the drive-through, or putting quarters in the shopping carts at Aldi. Just random little things that we can do to brighten someone's day.
All great ideas. Anybody have anything left for Adam?
I was going to suggest one more thing that I've been a part of before, but just helping cleaning up yard. This is a really good time to rake leaves and help people, like especially older people that can't do it themselves. That would be a really good, easy activity for kids to help out with, and they gain a lot with that.
Sorry, I was muted. My mouth was just moving. Thanks for being with us tonight, Adam. If everybody else will just stay on for just a few minutes, I have a door prize, and I'll see if any of the staff have anything that they want to get out to you guys. So thanks for being with us, Adam.
I am going to put a evaluation link down here at the bottom if others can click it before they leave.
We can do that. And it was great as always. Thank you, Adam.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay, I wrote everybody's, let me look on here real quick and see if there's someone that I need to add that came on late to the drawing. There's a couple names on here I need to add that I didn't add. So any of our other staff that want to say anything, also just be looking for those Christmas lists for your foster kiddos. If you don't have those filled out already, try to get those to CASA or your resource worker. Who's on here? Also, we do have Andrea Emerson on here tonight, another supervisor. I didn't see her earlier. Norika, Steve, Andrea, whoever, DCFS that's on here that wants to say anything, go for it while I'm writing these other names down.
I'm just glad to see so many of our resource parents on here. It's a pretty good turnout, and I'm very happy to see some of my folks. Hello.
It was good to put some of the names and faces together and see some new foster parents.
This is Rashonda. I'm a foster care supervisor in Washington County. This is my first time attending. And I learned. I actually learned some stuff, which is good. I can't show y'all my face because I'm at home and I don't have my hair together. So next time I'll show y'all. But good to see some of the foster parents I work with too. Meg, I know you, and who else do I recognize on here? Someone else. But just happy just to be able to participate.
Norika, I see your face. You have anything for us?
Not really, but I'm just glad we have a good attendance today. And do you want to talk about what's the topic for the next month's?
We will have the adoption unit on next month to talk about all things adoption. So if you have questions about adoptions, you can send those on the Facebook page, or you can email me. My email is over in the chat. Oh, it looks like it's sent. Sorry, my dog's barking in the background. It looks like it's sent as a direct message to somebody. So I'll make sure that I repost my email address for you guys to send any adoption questions. So we'll have a couple adoption workers on, and it's actually going to be the first Thursday in November instead of the second Thursday. The second Thursday is a holiday, and then the one after that we thought was just getting too close to the holiday. So we're going to go with that first Thursday in November, and then we will actually skip December and then hopefully get our training in line for the rest of the year, like at least maybe 6 months out. We're going to try to go ahead and get some topics already set up so you guys will know what to expect for the few months starting the holiday. And we will, as of right now, we are going to have the foster parent conference on April 30th at Grace Point Church in Bentonville. So assuming all things are okay, that's the plan for the year, is to go ahead and have an in-person foster parent conference on April 30th. That could change, but that's the plan for right now. Okay, drawing tonight is a Smitty's $25 gift card. So I guess you guys can go to lunch, and the winner for tonight. So I do have all the names here. Tonight's winner is Styles family. Or Styles on here still?
Yes, there is a Styles family here.
All right, Styles family. I will get this mailed out to you, okay?
Thank
No
you.
worries. Yeah, thank you. Great
Congrats.
information.
Okay.
Appreciate it, Adam, and Good to see everyone.
Thank
What's
you,
the
guys.
Facebook page, please? Sorry if I'm interrupting.
No, go ahead.
What's the Facebook page? The name of the Facebook
It
page?
is Fostering Connections of Northwest Arkansas.
Thanks.
If you have trouble getting on that, please email me. I'm gonna put this, because sometimes you have to be friends with me first. We're trying to figure out how to do that, to work that different. So I'm gonna put my email in the chat. And if you have trouble getting on to Fostering Connections of Northwest Arkansas, then email me and I will work with you personally to get you on there, okay? Okay, there's my information. So my email is in the chat. So any adoption questions for next month that you want answered, send those to me in email, or if you have trouble getting on our Facebook page and you're not on there, and I'm going to type that in the chat as well, so you'll know the name of it. All right. It was good to have such a big group. Thank you guys for being on tonight, and y'all have a good evening.
A great evening.
You as well. You guys take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Adam.
Bye.
All right, that was a good meeting. Yeah, I know. How do I turn? Off?
Just
Leave. All right.
Candace, if you'll just email me your first and last name, then I will try to get you set up on that Facebook page tomorrow when I get to work. Thank you.